Welcome to episode 17 of the Black and White Bistro, where black and white photographers come to grow, share, and get inspired. Thank you for joining us. We're glad you're here today. Yes, it's hard to believe, but on October 31st, Halloween night, I'll be celebrating the completion of 65.8 billion kilometers or 40.9 billion miles spent traveling around the sun. That's 70 birthdays. If nothing else, that makes me one tenacious and persistent old fart. At the Black and White Bistro, our goal is simple: to provide a quality space where artists who enjoy black and white photography can come to meet other black and white artists and maybe even gain some insights and tips from our guests. I'm the creator and host of the Black and White Bistro show, DavidLPayne, and we are thrilled to introduce you to a wonderful female black and white photographer who makes her home in Toronto, Canada. Now, gifted black and white artist, photographer, and fellow hat lover, pentaylor.
Hello, everyone. It's pentaylor. Warmest thanks to you, David, and to BNW Bistro for inviting me as the third female photographer to be included in this wonderful celebration of black and white imagery. Born and raised in Toronto, Canada, my late father showed me how fulfilling artistic expression could be. He was a prolific weekend painter, and the canvases in our home numbered in the hundreds. He was also an avid photographer and indulged his passion to document his travels in Europe with my mother. My photography style developed independently of his, but like my father, I've been inspired by my own travels, as I have shot in many countries worldwide over the years. I started my love of photography with a much-loved and handed-down Brownie box camera. Some years later, a friend loaned me his Canon AE1, and that was the start of my self-taught journey in 35mm film photography. I did take a portfolio course, however, where in every class our no-nonsense professor, a renowned photographer at the time, had all of us eating humble pie. So if we thought we were all that when we walked in the door, we quickly learned the opposite not long after. I've taken those hard lessons learned forward ever since. Humility is a good thing. For the next 15 years, I dabbled in infrared imagery with a Hasselblad X-Pan and eventually settled in with my trusty Nikon F90, which served me for several years, despite its worn-off camera back. During those years, I shot monochrome film images exclusively and mounted 7 solo exhibitions of that work. At this time, my images were represented by Ibid, the former monochrome-only stockhouse in Chicago, for several years. Through Ibid, I had the pleasure of seeing my work included in several international ad campaigns. 2 art dealers and 2 galleries in Toronto were also representing my photography at different times in those years, so I was very busy. Later, a lengthy trip to Botswana encouraged me to start shooting in Cibachrome in anticipation of the beautiful Savannah light. Since then, my work has been published numerous times, also appearing in 3 separate compilate volumes of minimal and street photography with a publishing house in Portugal. I curated and co-published the most recent of those volumes, a hardcover coffee table book I called The Art of Stride-By, featuring my own work as well as that of 21 other international stride-by photographers. Throughout a foray into color, though, my love of monochrome imagery never diminished. It was my first love, after all. Over the years, especially since the development of cameras and technology, I've come to realize that what matters the most to me in any photography, whether my own or that of others, is the eye used to see the potential of subject matter first. Gear comes second, always. I'm known for shooting what people walk by without seeing, and that continues to be the very essence of my inspiration. In this process, I like to challenge the eye of my viewers through the angle, the framing, or just the fractal quality of the subject matter itself. Although I started with the Canon SLR, since the early 2000s I've come to embrace the digital world with a Fuji S Pro and various Nikon DSLRs, as well as the ease and spontaneity of my iPhone Pro Max. After years of lugging heavy gear around, my poor back is infinitely happier. I've been a hub moderator for the past 6 years, starting with Raw on Instagram, the platform where I also later founded 2 independent hubs, and here on Vero as well since our Snap community came on board. I'm always inspired by the beautiful work and talent of others, and nothing gives me greater pleasure in that role than celebrating their images in features. As my own work continues to be featured as well, I always view my time moderating as an opportunity to give back. Many thanks to all of you for listening to my story. It's been my pleasure to share it.
Many thanks, my friend. Over the next few minutes, we will discover 3 of Penn's personal favorite images and the story behind each. And we'll share with you our live Zoom interview with Penn, in which she shared some insights into her journey in black and white photography. Now let's enjoy Penn's first artist favorite image as she tells us the story behind it.
I named this one A Giant Step for Person Kind. Through my love of street, I continue to be fascinated by stills of people walking mid-movement, immersed in their own moments, going about their lives, and perhaps unaware of their broader environment. What are also known as stride-by images, the subjects of these are made even more interesting by their backdrop or circumstance, creating the image of what has come together for only that split second. Like impromptu performers on stage, the stride-by subject's world can be a momentary flash of something great, resulting in a fortuitous integrated beauty that is all too easily missed. For me, it's always fun to capture human motion from other points of view. In this case, a textural one after situating myself underneath a New York City staircase. This was a spontaneous moment after whipping out my omnipresent iPhone.
And now, here's our live Zoom interview with Penn Taylor, with her wearing her fedora and me in my pork pie hat, as she shares her answers to our questions and provides personal insights into her black and white photography journey. Welcome back to the Black and White Bistro. Oh, we've got a real Halloween treat for you today. No tricks. Today, we're proud and pleased to bring you Penn Taylor live from Toronto, Canada. Penn, how are you? Thanks so much for being on the show.
David, I'm just fine, and I'm absolutely delighted to be included as your 3rd female photographer in this wonderful series.
Penn, let's get into our first question.
Sure.
How did you become interested in black and white photography, and what is it about black and white that interests you?
Well, David, when I was 9 years old, living in a house surrounded by Look magazines, do you remember those? Full of wonderful black and white journalism, I came across a print of the iconic 1941 Roaring Lion portrait of Winston Churchill when it was sitting in a nearby store window. The portrait had been photographed in monochrome by our then new Canadian Yusuf Karsh. And looking at it, I was utterly fascinated and intrigued. Fun fact about this portrait, a couple of fun facts actually. Churchill, and I learned this many years later, but apparently the reason for Churchill's iconic scowl in this portrait was because Yusuf decided he didn't want to photograph him with his ever-present cigar in his mouth. So he took it out of his mouth, and that was the result. So there you go. Don't ever take a cigar out of Winston Churchill's mouth. Now, I have another story about that portrait because the original of this portrait hung in a prominent Canadian hotel in Ottawa, where Yusuf Karsh was living in his later years. During the lockdown of COVID, the portrait was stolen off the wall and replaced with a fake, which remained for 8 years, until it was discovered by someone who worked at the hotel, who noticed a difference in the frame. After years of chasing down this original, it was finally found a month ago in the hands of an Italian buyer who had purchased it through Sotheby's in London, neither of whom were aware that they were dealing with stolen goods because it had not been reported at that time. How about that?
Wow.
Yeah.
Winston
And
Churchill without a cigar in his mouth. That's like impossible to believe. I mean, yeah, I saw the movie Gary Oldman did of Winston Churchill, and I didn't know that he could handle a cigar for that long. It was pretty impressive.
well, I think he was so accustomed to having it in his mouth that he didn't appreciate anyone fooling with it. So poor Yusuf somehow managed to get through that and live to a ripe old age. So good for him.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah.
Speaking of photographers that did black and white, which 2 or 3 black and white photographers have inspired you the most, and what is it about each of them that spoke to you?
Well, I will say that probably the first black and white photographer was the American Herb Ritz. And that was actually the first coffee table book of photography that I ever bought. And I was a huge Madonna fan in the 80s, like scary huge fan. And I went to see her in concert many times. And I happened to come across or see a portrait that he had shot of her. And it's the iconic one, the profile shot where she's got her head back. And I remember thinking that is the most beautiful photograph of Madonna I've ever seen. So I went out and bought his book. And the book was beautiful. It had fabric covering. It fit into a sleeve, and inside was the most beautiful, contrasted black and white portraits of people. A lot of naked men because he was gay, but beautiful, beautiful work. He taught me about minimalism, and he taught me about the appreciation of black and white photography. So that's the first photographer. And then the second one is the American photojournalist, Lee Miller. Now, coincidentally, there is a film out about her with Kate Winslet in the role. Now, I had heard about Lee's work in the past, as well as her absolute tenacity in surviving in a chauvinist editor's world of the 1940s. So she was an outspoken ex-model, but she was just not being taken seriously behind the camera. And she wanted to be a war correspondent. She felt that this was her calling. She wanted to go over to Europe and document everything that was going on over there. And what got her started on that was hearing about the trains that were taking people away and the people were disappearing. And she was intrigued. So she did a long drive with another journalist. And it ended up being 500 miles around Europe, Germany. And she went so this was after the Americans went into Germany and liberated, so that she was able to kind of surreptitiously get access into these concentration camps. And what she saw and documented was the most shocking work the world had ever seen. And she also managed to bribe her way into Hitler's house. And there's a very funny scene in the movie where she gets into his bathtub and leaves her muddy boots by the side and leaves a portrait of him on the side of the bathtub. And anyway, it was something that made Lee, gave her some satisfaction to know that she was capturing all of this on film. So the sad part was, so all of this work, capturing all these atrocities of the concentration camps was met with great resistance. She tried to get the work published in British Vogue, and they wouldn't do it. The magazine came out, they had pictures of something else, and she was absolutely livid. And finally, they appeared in American Vogue. So as a result of that work, she became one of the most important war correspondents of all time. And it was because of her work and just, bringing these atrocities to light. Fascinating woman, just like me. She doesn't take no for an answer. And I just loved her. I loved her. She had balls. She had balls. And that's what I liked about her. So if anybody hasn't seen the movie Lee with Kate Winslet, I recommend it because it's a great movie.
I'm waiting for it. I'm waiting for the movie Lee to become available online, like in the Apple Store, because I've read 5 reviews about it, and each one says, I got to see this.
Yeah, you really do.
If you had just a thought, but if you had to sum up her work in one word, what would it be?
I would say it was the shock of her work. The fact that she had the tenacity to go into places that were male dominated. She was unapologetic about being a woman. She was determined to go and get the shots no matter what. She was going to go and get these images printed. I just love her tenacity, and her work was absolutely poignant and shocking. So I like to be affected like that when I go see anybody's work. I like to be viscerally affected, and this was what her work does for me.
Wow. It's interesting the way you talk about how she made you feel. I was 2 days ago, I met a friend of my nephew's who's developed an interest in photography. Went out and got himself a camera, and he knows that I shoot. So we had an informal 3-hour walkabout together, and I was trying to get him to stop shooting what I saw. I said, look, you just got to remember 3 things. Shoot what moves you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Second, understand why you were moved by that light, that shadow, that gesture, that face. And then third, capture that first in your brain. I said, great shots aren't made in a camera. Great shots are made up here.
I absolutely agree with that.
Absolutely. I said, you gotta visualize.
And with the eye. And with the eye.
Yeah, you gotta be able to see it.
Yep.
And it was cute. He's writing everything down in Japanese because he's Japanese. And he sent me last night 4 of his favorite shots from our walk around.
Mm-hmm.
And for a newbie, a rookie, he did great. And
fantastic.
Yeah, we're going to go out again. But I think the point you made about Lee is really important. Photography, you got to feel what you're seeing.
Yep.
Because you don't shoot what you see, you shoot what you feel.
But there's also it's a combination of both, David. I think that, I firmly believe, and I mentioned this in my bio, but I firmly believe that one needs an eye. First of all, you need an eye to capture an image, and the brain comes into that too, but you need an eye. Without the eye, and I'm not talking about just seeing like eyes see, I'm talking about having the eye to determine how that image is going to be appealing. What is the best part of, and how do you think that will be appealing to other people? How does it appeal to me? If it appeals to me immediately, then I know I'm doing the right thing.
Great points. Great points.
I have one other person I want to talk about.
Go ahead.
So I don't know if you've heard about this photographer, but Bill Cunningham. So Bill Cunningham was a very simple kind of a man living in New York City. And he rose to fame as being a photographer of New York City street fashion. So I first learned about his work in the 2018 documentary called The Times of Bill Cunningham. And he was a very eccentric character. He lived a very simple life. He rented a room in Carnegie Hall, which is something Carnegie Hall did for artists that were, not doing so well and didn't have the money to spend on rent. So he was living in Carnegie Hall, and he would get around New York City on his bicycle. And this is how everybody had seen Bill Cunningham going around with his camera around his neck, capturing these wonderful black and white. I like to think of him as being really the first New York City street photographer, because he caught the fashion, he caught the people, he caught the essence of everything that was going on in New York City at that time. And he grew to be so popular that they were inviting him to the shows to get him to document their clothing.
Wow.
Sadly, he's not around anymore, but, very fascinating man. So there is another great documentary to see, The Times of Bill Cunningham. Fascinating film.
Let me write that down. Bill Cunningham, New York.
The Times of Bill Cunningham.
Oh, that just made my must-see list.
Very good.
That brings us to the end of today's Black and White Bistro Show, Part 1. We hope you enjoyed meeting Penn Taylor and her amazing black and white photography journey. To see more of her images, take a few moments to visit her gallery on Vero. Share some likes, and consider following her captivating compositions in black and white, if you aren't doing so already. We'd like to thank Penn Taylor for joining us on today's show. Would you like to have a chance to be featured on the Black and White Bistro Show? First, follow us on Vero at BNW Bistro. Second, start using our hashtag BNW Bistro on your best black and white image post. Finally, connect with us on Vero so that you can send us a DM, or you can send an email to me at dave@bnwbistro.com, indicating your interest in being our guest, and tell me a little bit about yourself and your black and white photography journey. If you enjoyed today's show, make sure to mark your calendars so that you don't miss episode 17, part 2, which will be premiering exclusively on Vero next week, so you can see the conclusion of our Penn Taylor episode. And don't forget, if you're not shooting in black and white, you're only seeing half the picture. Now, remember to follow us at BNW Bistro. Check out and subscribe to our new YouTube channel, where you can watch all of our episodes in your own native language subtitles. Then get out there and create some great black and white photographs. Oh, and don't forget, Happy Halloween!